Welcome back to Tell Me More Stories Told as podcast, where we tell you more about stories that grip our collective imagination.
And today's tale, takes us back to 1982.
Ah,
Well,
1982.
been a year.
Yeah.
Most remember, I think, for shoulder pads and leg warmers and, the rise of MTV.
Big hair.
Big hair, yes. But also for a truly chilling event that changed how we look at everyday products.
So, okay, picture this. You're in Chicago.
Yeah.
There's a normal week. You have a headache.
Right.
And so you do, what, millions of people do you reach for that familiar bottle of Tylenol?
Yeah, except in this case, 7 people in the Chicago area didn't just get relief from the aches and pains.
Oh.
They got a lethal dose of cyanide hidden within those seemingly harmless capsules.
Cyanide sounds like something out of a, spy movie,
Right.
not your average medicine cabinet.
Exactly. And the scariest part is this wasn't a case of like a bad batch from the factory or something.
Right.
The tampering happened after those Tylenol bottles hit store shelves.
So we're talking about someone intentionally targeting everyday people.
Absolutely. And it just sent this wave of fear across the nation.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, imagine that unsettling feeling like, could anything you buy be tampered with?
Yeah.
It's...
First victim, 12-year-old Mary Kellerman.
Yeah.
I mean, the initial reports, they probably didn't even connect it to Tylenol, just a tragic, isolated incident, right?
Right, until a few days later,
Oh, no.
when 6 more people died, all adults, all in the Chicago area, and all after taking Tylenol.
That's when the alarm bell?
Investigators had a horrifying pattern on their hands.
Oh, I bet the media was in a frenzy.
Oh, absolutely. The news just spread like wildfire, and the public was understandably terrified.
Right.
People were emptying their medicine cabinets. I mean, afraid to take anything.
Yeah, you don't know what's safe.
Yeah.
So what did Johnson & Johnson, the makers of Tylenol, do? I mean, this wasn't just bad press. This was a full-blown crisis.
Yeah, they acted swiftly and decisively. They issued a nationwide recall of all Tylenol products.
Wow.
31 million bottles.
That's a lot.
Pulled off the shelves, one of the largest pharmaceutical recalls in history.
Yeah.
And, it showed how seriously they took this threat.
I mean, that must have been a logistical nightmare.
Oh, yeah.
And a huge financial hit, too.
No doubt. But they also offered a reward and worked really closely with law enforcement.
Right.
They knew public trust was shattered and rebuilding it was paramount.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now finding the culprit that had to be priority number 1 for the authorities.
A massive investigation ensued.
I can imagine.
Police, federal agents, and everyone was on this case.
Right.
But imagine the challenge. You're not looking for someone who knew the victims.
Right.
This was seemingly random, targeting anyone who might buy Tylenol.
Just so random.
Right.
And the tampering happening after the bottles left the factory, that must have made it even harder.
Right. The investigators quickly realized this wasn't a case of contamination at the source.
Okay.
This pointed to someone tampering with those bottles somewhere along the distribution chain.
Right.
Maybe even right there in the stores.
It's scary to think about.
Okay, so we've got this nationwide panic, this frantic investigation, and then things take an even darker turn, right? Tell me about the extortion letter.
Right in the midst of the investigation, Johnson & Johnson received a letter. And it was from someone claiming responsibility for the poisonings and demanding $1 million to stop the killings.
Oh my gosh, that's chilling. Talk about adding fuel to the fire.
Yeah.
Did they ever find out who sent it?
They did. The FBI, using handwriting analysis and other techniques, traced the letter back to a man named James William Lewis.
So case closed, they got their guy.
Not so fast.
Right.
Lewis became the prime suspect, no doubt.
Okay.
But authorities, despite intense scrutiny, couldn't link him directly to the actual poisonings.
Oh, so frustrating. This guy sends this terrifying extortion letter, capitalizes on this tragedy, but they
Yes.
can't pin the murders on him?
Exactly.
Wow.
It's a tangled web.
Yeah.
And Lewis, while certainly a person of interest, was only convicted for the extortion attempt,
Oh, wow.
sentenced to 10 years.
Wow.
The murders themselves remained a mystery.
So if you're as captivated by this story as we are, hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss out on the twists and turns this case takes next. But for now, let's unpack some of the other theories and suspects that emerged during the investigation.
There were quite a few, and they take us down some fascinating and unsettling paths. So while James William Lewis was serving time for that extortion, the investigators, they were still digging, trying to find that missing link to the actual Tylenol murders.
Makes sense. I mean, you don't just drop a case like this, especially with so many lives lost and the public, still on edge.
Right, and that led them to another intriguing individual, Roger Arnold.
Okay, Arnold, what's his connection to all of this?
He was a dock worker, and get this, he had access to potassium cyanide.
Really?
Not only that, but there were reports that he'd made some unsettling remarks about poisoning people in the past.
Wait, hold on. Access to cyanide and talk about poisoning? That's way too many red flags to ignore.
Exactly, and the connections got even stranger. Arnold had actually worked with the father of one of the victims, Mary Reiner, and his wife had received treatment at a hospital that was really close to the store where Mary bought the tainted Tylenol.
Wow, okay, that's a lot of coincidences.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to see why investigators zeroed in on him.
And the plot thickens. They discovered that Arnold had a copy of The Poor Man's James Bond, a
Uh,
book with instructions on how to make potassium cyanide.
Seriously, a DIY cyanide recipe book that's downright creepy.
The pieces seemed to be falling into place, but there was a twist.
Okay, what happened?
Despite all this, Arnold was never actually charged with the Tylenol murders.
You're kidding, why not? With all that evidence, it seems like they had their guy.
Well, his story took a tragic turn in a case of mistaken identity. Arnold ended up fatally shooting a man he believed was responsible for the breakup of his marriage.
Wow, talk about an unexpected turn of events. So this unrelated incident basically derailed the Tylenol investigation.
In a way, yes. Arnold was convicted of murder for the shooting and spent 15 years in prison. The Tylenol murders, despite all the suspicions surrounding Arnold, remained officially unsolved.
Wow, it's incredible how complex these investigations can be. It's not always a straight line to the truth.
Precisely. And this case, with all its twists and turns, is a prime example. It kept everyone guessing for years, even sparking theories about some infamous figures.
You mean like notorious serial killers? Did they ever look into those possibilities?
They did. There was even a point where the Unabomber Ted Kaczynski came onto their radar.
Whoa, the Unabomber. What possible connection could he have to the Tylenol case?
Well, some of Kaczynski's early crimes actually took place in the Chicago area around the time of the poisonings.
Interesting, but I guess geography alone isn't enough to make someone a prime suspect.
Of course not, but investigators were leaving no stone unturned. They requested a DNA sample from Kaczynski, but he denied any involvement, and the DNA didn't match the evidence from the Tylenol bottles.
Okay, so another dead end. It's incredible how this case, even with all the advancements in forensic science, remains unsolved.
Yeah.
It really highlights the dedication of those investigators, tirelessly pursuing every lead, even decades later.
Absolutely, and speaking of advancements, there's one more development in this saga that's worth exploring.
Huh?
In 2009, authorities decided to revisit the evidence using the latest DNA technology available.
That makes sense. DNA analysis has come a long way since the 80s.
Hmm.
What were they hoping to find?
They searched the home of James William Lewis, the extortionist, hoping to uncover something that could finally link him to the poisonings.
Yeah, it seems they never fully ruled him out as a suspect, even after all those years.
Despite seizing various items, they didn't find anything conclusive, but they didn't stop there. In 2010, they took a bold step and exhumed the body of Roger Arnold to obtain a DNA sample.
Wow, exhumation. They must have been really convinced Arnold was involved. What did the tests reveal?
The results, unfortunately, were inconclusive. They ruled out both Lewis and Arnold as the perpetrators.
Another setback? But I guess that's the nature of cold cases. Sometimes the answers remain elusive.
It's a testament to their commitment that investigators continue to re-examine the evidence, hoping that one day technology will provide that missing piece of the puzzle.
So we've got this mystery that continues to baffle. But beyond the whodunit, the Tylenol murders had a profound impact.
Right? Didn't this case completely change the way we think about over-the-counter medications?
You're absolutely right. The impact extended far beyond catching the culprit. This was a wake-up call for the entire nation about product safety, and it led to some major changes in how medications are packaged and sold.
Before the Tylenol murders, tamper-resistant packaging wasn't really a thing, was it?
It wasn't. Back then, you could pick up a bottle of pills, and there was no way to know for sure if it had been opened or messed with.
Yeah,
It's pretty unnerving to think about now.
it is. We take those safety seals and tamper-evident features for granted these days.
Right. The Tylenol case was a turning point.
Yeah.
It forced the industry to take a hard look at product safety and consumer protection. They knew they had to regain the public's trust, and fast.
So how did things change? What did they do to make medications safer?
Johnson & Johnson, to their credit, were at the forefront of that change. They spearheaded the development of tamper-resistant packaging.
Yeah. Those foil seals, plastic wraps, even the little cotton balls inside bottles, all of that came about because of this tragedy.
It's fascinating how a crisis can lead to innovation. I bet those early tamper-resistant packages felt like a revelation to people.
They did. Suddenly there was a visual cue that someone had messed with the product. It gave consumers a sense of security they didn't have before.
Did this catch on industry-wide? Did other pharmaceutical companies follow suit?
Absolutely. Tamper-resistant packaging became the standard not just for Tylenol, but for virtually all over-the-counter medications.
Okay.
It wasn't just good practice, it was essential for rebuilding consumer confidence.
The Tylenol murders also spurred changes in how medications were formulated, didn't they? What's the story behind the caplet?
That's right before this capsules were a common way to deliver medication,
Sure.
but they were also vulnerable to tampering. Someone could easily open a capsule, add a contaminant, and reseal it without detection.
Right, makes sense.
So the caplet was born out of a need for something safer. Exactly. The caplet is essentially a tablet shaped like a capsule. It combines the convenience of a capsule with the tamper resistance of a solid tablet, a clever solution to a dangerous problem.
Wow, what about legal changes? Did the Tylenol case lead to any new laws or regulations?
It did, believe it or not, before 1982, product tampering wasn't a federal crime in the United States.
Really? That seems hard to believe now, considering the potential for harm.
The Tylenol murders changed that the public outcry was so strong that Congress passed the Tylenol bill, officially known as the Federal Anti-Tampering Act of 1982. It made product tampering a federal crime with serious penalties.
That's a powerful legacy for such a horrific event. It shows how a crisis can drive meaningful change.
It's a stark reminder that sometimes progress comes at a terrible cost, but the changes that emerged from the Tylenol murders have undoubtedly made our world safer.
You mentioned copycat attacks earlier. What can you tell us about those?
Well, unfortunately, the Tylenol case inspired a wave of copycat attacks.
Oh.
People saw the widespread panic and the media attention that it generated, and some, for whatever twisted reason, wanted to replicate that.
Did these copycat attacks involve Tylenol as well?
Not always. There were cases of other products being tampered with, everything from food to beverages to household items. It showed how this event had a ripple effect, creating a climate of fear and paranoia.
It's chilling to think that someone would exploit a tragedy like this for their own twisted purposes.
These copycat attacks presented another challenge for law enforcement. They had to develop new strategies for investigating product tampering, dealing with the media frenzy, and reassuring the public.
Right, it sounds like a lot.
It was.
What kind of long-term impact did these events have on law enforcement and the way they handle such cases?
They led to a much more proactive approach. Law enforcement agencies started working more closely with manufacturers, retailers, and the media to prevent and respond to product tampering incidents. They also invested heavily in forensic technology and training to better investigate these crimes.
So the Tylenol murders, as tragic as they were, left a lasting mark on product safety and consumer protection.
It's a stark reminder that even in the most ordinary aspects of our lives, like reaching for a bottle of pain reliever, we're not immune to the potential for harm. The changes brought about by this case are a testament to the power of human resilience and the ongoing quest for a safer world.
And while the mystery of who committed these crimes remains unsolved, the impact on how we approach product safety is undeniable.
It's a legacy that lives on in every tamper-resistant package, every caplet we take, and every measure taken to protect consumers from those who would seek to do them harm.
Well, this has been a fascinating, albeit chilling, deep dive into the Chicago Tylenol murders.
It's a story that continues to captivate and intrigue, reminding us of the importance of vigilance, innovation, and our collective responsibility for safety.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Tell Me More Stories Told This podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes where we unpack more captivating tales from history.
Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.